Madman's Nutty Pot Limit Omaha journey. We've got, it looks like an open limper on the button, so we're going to make a note of that. And I've just sat in at this table, or I've just sat down at this table. I guess sat in is more precise terminology for the point at which I'm actually dealt into a hand and I'm sat into the game. Here I am sat down at the table. I don't know. What's going on? I'm a little bit less well rested than on previous days. I did record a podcast last night at 12:30 my time, which usually would not be such a late feeling time for me, but I've been waking up by 9 a.m. every day and doing my morning routine and getting myself ready and streaming at 10 a.m. every day my time. So that makes, midnight feel later than it does the rest of the time when I need my 8 hours, but I got about 7-ish, 7.5 maybe, so we'll take it. It's fine. The podcast I was recording was on The Bad Batch, the new animated series. It's a Star Wars series that takes place after the Clone Wars. I really enjoy it. I recommend people check it out. If you like Star Wars and you don't watch it, and you don't absolutely hate animation, I think you're definitely missing something. And if you do absolutely hate animation, I think you're missing something. But that's fine, People like what they like. No shaming. All right, looks like one more hand I'm going to sit out, and then we'll get dealt in. So that was on Star Wars Universe Podcast, which you can check out at theethicalpanda.com. All right, end of plugs. Now we'll take a look at, speaking of plugs, I've been watching the new season of Master of None. I think it's very good, and it's very different than the previous seasons. There's aspects of it that I don't enjoy as much than just that it's not, I think, as focused on comedy. It's a little more drama, I'd say. But I think it's very well done, and I recommend people at least check out the first episode and decide whether that's kind of the tone of what you want to watch. And then Kim's Convenience season 5 came out on Netflix, so that's a little bit more laugh-filled. But I enjoy both. Okay. However, I know you're here for the Pot Limit Omaha. So, once again, welcome to Volume 12, rounding out the dozen of ZenMadman's Pot Limit Omaha nuttiness. We'll just call it something different every day. Why don't we do that? And it looks like there's a big pot going just before we get dealt in. And that person won it. Hopefully the other person will stay, although we haven't really seen anything from them. Besides, they're buying in short. People buying in short is often a sign that they're going to be a weaker player. Here I have some double-suited trash, right? The 3-4-7 connect, and then the queen's like, all right, what are you all doing? So if instead of the queen we had a more straightening card, that sounds like that's not a good way to describe a hand during Pride Month, eh? But maybe if the other cards were closer to the queen, that would be a much better hand. We'll say it that way. But so, where are we? We're here. And we fold double-suited trash like that. Now we have aces, pretty trashy aces. The 3 and the 4 connect, and they connect with the ace, which is nice. And there's a 4 high flush draw, which is, a flush draw, technically. A board like ace 2-5 would be really fun, because then we'd flop top set and a straight flush. Top set, of course, would be totally useless in that scenario. I'm going to raise. If you're ever going to overlimp aces, this may be, I think I have enough equity that it's worth getting the money in if I flop an ace. Or what other good flops are there going to be besides ace 2-5 and 2-5-6? Let's see, like 2-5 king, 2-5 queen, 2-5 jack, that kind of thing, where I have the open ender and I have the overpair, something like that. I can put some money in. So I flop a 4. This is a very dry board. 2 of my opponents are quite short. So what I want to do is get it in against one of those 2 players. and hope the player on the button just folds. But I don't really want to build a big pot multi-way out of position. So if one of those two players were to bet, I would probably try to get it in against them. But with this player betting, I have the gut shot. I have the aces. So far, they've played 100% of their hands, all of them passively. This feels like too strong to check fold, even though, like, it just feels like they can just bet so much here. I don't really have anywhere to go besides hitting the 5. If I hit the 5, 3, 6. I actually really hate this spot. Okay. So why am I thinking about calling? I'm thinking about calling because I feel like I'm getting pushed around if I'm just folding here. This bet can be made so easily from this player, and is there a large chance that they don't follow it up? I don't know. I'm not particularly worried about these other opponents. I am going to go ahead and fold. I don't like it, but at the same time, the main thing is that I'm going to be out of position. I'm still multi-way. Somebody could check raise. You know, so kings. Okay, I see. So I'm going to mark that hand and talk about it more later. The board was so dry that I feel like I'm just going to mark it and talk about it more later. That's how it's going to be. Of course, when somebody turns up with kings and they win a sizable pot and you had aces, it's kind of unpleasant, and it can feel like, oh, we definitely misplayed the hand. I certainly may have misplayed the hand, but I don't want to let the fact that they had exactly that one hand overly influence my thoughts about the hand. I wonder what they would have done though if I had check called. Let me just see again. Turn queen. Interesting. Okay. All right. Back to the matter at hand, which is a garbage hand. All right, we have an open limp from the hijack. That's nice to see. This other player overlimped kings, right? So weak kings, that's not necessarily a lot to write home about, but it's perhaps not totally irrelevant. Something to be aware of. King, king, 9 deuce with some weak suits. And deuce single suited. So yeah. Something to be aware of. I mean, when people have a 0 pre-flop raise percentage, they're probably limping some of their king-king. They might be limping some ace-ace. But we don't have a large sample on them yet, so. All right, we have a raised pot. Ace-9-3, that's going to favor the person who raised in general, as they're going to have, you know, all the ace-ace combinations. Nobody else is going to have many of those at all, if any. Of course, somebody could have a hand like pocket 9s or pocket 3s, and those would really be the only hands that a hand like pocket 9s would, pocket aces would expect to make too much money from, right? The thing about a board like this is, like, it's very safe, but it's not often very profitable if you have top set, because there's just not that much left for people to have. Now on the turn, there's all manner of draws, right? A flush draw presented itself, as well as a bevy of straight draws with those two connected cards, and everybody wants to put all their money in. Okay, so the button did flop the stone colds, and the flush came runner, but nobody had it. Somehow nobody had it, maybe because I folded the the queen high flush. But obviously I couldn't have gotten there. Aside from the fact that I shouldn't have called pre-flop, I wouldn't call on the flop or the turn or whenever the money went, and I think on the turn. All right, king 7-4. Yeah, so they did like check back top set. So I'm gonna say, let's see, check back. Ace ace on ace 9-3 rainbow multi-way big pot. So the thing about that is, like, they ended up winning a lot more money because of it, but they did give their opponents potentially substantial equity. With a hand that strong and that little that people can have, can't really criticize it too much. So I think double suited aces, double suited eights, yeah, double suited eights to the king and the queen are probably going to be an open from all positions. So I'm going to open it. And I think they're probably also going to be a hand that I can call a 3-bet with because of the double suitedness and, you know, the king queeniness. And I have an overpair, yay. And I have 2 backdoor flush draws to the non-nuts. I'm going to check. And I'm going to try and keep an eye on kind of how often people bet when they're just last to act in these games. So now the deuce paired. And if nobody has a deuce, my overpair actually has a reasonable chance of being good. I also have a king-high flush draw. But I have somebody who bet out half pot. They are the ones who had kings that time. They also, what was the other hand? There's another significant hand, I think, that we saw. I'm going to go ahead and fold. It's a paired board. They're the small blind. They can have pocket 2s, pocket 3s, pocket 4s. Ace 5 and 5, 6 I'm drawing quite live against. A deuce or an 8 would be good, as well as all of my flush cards. So, you know, I think you can potentially argue for a call there. If I had a suited ace, I'd be more likely to, as if I do make my ace-high flush draw and then my opponent checks, maybe I can even squeeze some value out. Whereas with the king-high flush draw on the paired board, even when I get there, I don't think I can really put any money in with any level of confidence. I'll mark that hand, though, primarily for pre-flop. In terms of the turn or flop bet, I mean, I could also consider betting that flop, I guess. I don't know. But I'm going to mark it specifically for pre-flop. Again, I'm still in the trying to kind of shore up the pre-flop ranges and get them to the point where I don't know if in PLO they'll ever be just like super unconscious, because there's probably going to have to be so many heuristics. It's not going to be like I see a particular combo and I just know everything about that combo, right? Because there's just so many combos, although a lot of them are quite tragic. And we have 3-bet out of the limp re-raise. Okay, so we have we also have open limp re-raise with, let's see what they ended up having. I mean, I figure they're gonna jam here and they'll probably get called. Queen Jack Jack 7. Okay, and they get called by like everything can beat them, right, in their opponent's hand except for ace 3. And so much for that note, as that player just bounced. That's fine. All right, raising a call. I'm not exactly sure who this board favors. It seems like it's got decent options for the raiser and the caller. Leading out with half pot there, in position probably isn't going to have a lot of nut flushes, and I know they didn't have the second nut flush, but the other person can't know that. And this is garbage. I believe on the button I might open something sort of trashy looking like this. Maybe not with the tri-suit, I'm not sure. But yeah, in PLO, I don't know if it's ever going to be the same kind of just reflexive, like just owning the pre-flop standards the same way I did in Limit Hold'em when I was really grinding hard at that game, really studying and like researching basically what hands to play. Here I think it's going to be more about developing heuristics and building sort of a better intuition for how to play. All right, so if we want to look at our hand on this board, we would have a wrap, right? A queen, 10, 9. So if a queen, a 10, a 9, or a 7 came, we'd make a straight. However, there's already a pair of jacks on board. Any of those cards could give someone a boat if they don't have one already, or they could get one on the river. So we wouldn't really be able to play our hand with confidence, even if we got there. So that's one of the reasons those kind of things aren't Very good. Ace, king, 9, 3. The 9, I believe, is a quite poor card. The king, though, like ace and king with a suited ace, I think we play most of these in most positions. But again, this is a hand that I'll mark for pre-flop, and we'll just check up on it. Now the 9 is, I'm sorry, I know I said mostly a useless card. Apologies to the 9, quite a useful card here. I flop top 2 pair, and because I'm up against two kind of loose-ish passive players, I think just, put the money in the pot. Unless the turn, like basically a 6, 7, 8, king, ace, or 9 are the only cards that aren't going to be, somewhat threatening. I have the 3, so I think that's pretty good. That means I'm blocking the I'm gonna bet a little bigger. What am I blocking? I'm blocking the nuts, right? I'm blocking the wheel because I have the 3. It doesn't mean somebody can't have it, but it means they're a little less likely to have it. So it makes it easier to bet my top 2 pair for value, and makes it less likely that they're going to continue. And if they folded some equity, if they had an ace with some overcards to the 9, or like a 5 with it or something, then they had a decent amount of equity, and I'm pleased that they folded. That's fine, right? We're not always hoping to build like a really big pot. A lot of the time we just want to get, let's get some chips in there when our equity's good, and then if we can get our opponents to fold at any point, like they're usually folding equity. I head far from the nuts. Give a shout out to Cowcast TV. Thanks for the follow. We're up to 40, so just 10 more, and we can be a Twitch affiliate and have subscriptions and like channel points and stuff. I don't know what I'm going to do with channel points. If anybody has any suggestions in terms of what they think would be fun uses for channel points, go ahead and make them in the chat, or if you're on YouTube, in the comments. If you're on YouTube, channel points are this Twitch thing where, in general, you watch over a period of time, you get points, and then you spend them often to get whoever's streaming to do something silly a lot of the time, but there can be many other uses. Maybe like pick a hand for review. At the moment, I'm just like, if you want to review a hand, just let me know. We'll do it. No points needed. But yeah, maybe at some point, like 10,000 points or whatever, I'll put your hand in a feedback session, and we'll analyze it. Okay, so this player is going to get the purple. They're gonna, yeah. So 11 hands, 12 now, and they've played all of them. They voluntarily put money in the pot with all of them. That can't be good. It just can't be good. They haven't gotten dealt a good hand 12 hands in a row. It's extremely unlikely. So we're going to promote them. They do this weird back raise, right, where they make it 10 against 450, and they could have made it a lot more. So basically, they're just kind of juicing the pot up. So now there's $40 in the middle, which the player in the cutoff to my direct right is like, oh, okay, that's basically one bet for me. That's all my chips. But everybody else actually has a significant amount more. So having that bigger pot size means that there's a better chance that they can get all the money in after the flop. And it looks like, are they just going to take it down with their $10 raise and then 20 on the flop? In terms of like how this board hits people's ranges, like aces are still going to be good a lot here, but 4 ways, it's very easy for people to make 2 pair. Against reasonable players, those like 3 and 2, those cards on the board are going to be really good for the player with aces, because it's going to be very unlikely that anybody has pocket 3s, pocket 2s, or like a queen 3, queen 2, or 3-2 for that matter. Given that they made it 10 and that these players seem to play a lot of hands, I think that effect would be diminished, but still somewhat present. After all, this is the only player who's played 100% of their hands. And so the first hands people fold are generally the ones with threes and the ones with deuces, or the ones with three of a card. You know, like 3 10s and a 7, like that. People are folding that, but not everyone. I see people play those. You know, you're usually in a pretty good game. All right, so this person seems to have kind of turned on that shifted into more aggro gear. So we'll see how that persists, or if that persists, or if maybe they've just had a few good hands, right? I mean, anybody can catch some good hands for a while. That's a thing. Just because somebody's playing a bunch of hands. This doesn't look good though. Okay. Something definitely was going on. I wasn't sure whether that person was timing out and we're probably going to lose them. Who knows? Or whether I was having a connection issue. Ignition is sometimes a little bit squirrely. But recently I feel like it's been pretty solid. There used to be some bug where you couldn't reload if, like, sometimes you just get stuck and you could never buy more chips at a table. And that was unfortunate. But it seems like that's gone. So hopefully they've been kind of taking care of things and making making the software better gaming experience. I do have a philosophy though, or a theory of quality of online poker games, which is the better the software is, the worse the games are. As in, the better the software is, the more good players want to play on that software, and therefore the tougher the games tend to be. So if you have bad software, then you often have bad players, or you have people who are less likely to be taking the game very seriously and like trying to play for a living or whatever. If you're trying to play, 8 hours a day, several days a week, or most days or every day, it can be, there's maybe more frustration with having annoying software. Whereas if you're just going to gamble and then something doesn't work, it's like, all right, whatever, I'll just do something else, or it's not a big deal. So I think often a lot of the best opportunities are games where, you have to put up with some software glitchiness. Ace, Queen, 10, 9, really good 4-betting hand, I think, double suited. It's not to say that I necessarily would 4-bet this person. I have bottom 2 pair, not great. I have none of my suit, also not great. I do have a gut shot to the nuts, and my opponent has a super wide range. So they bet full pot, and I'm not like quite a believer here, right, in terms of really thinking that they have a whole lot. But my hand has a ton of what we call reverse implied odds, where if I make my hand and they keep betting, I'm gonna have to put money in where I'm gonna end up losing a lot, and I'm gonna lose on that investment basically. So for that reason, I was considering betting the flop to kind of just sort of to keep this person from doing it. But whatever. Sometimes you just flop something that that doesn't look good, but has a fair amount of equity, and you're out of position, your opponent pots it, and there's not that much you can do about it. If we had less money behind, I might get it in, but we had a fair amount of money behind. All right, so this player's raising 50% of their hand so far. Nobody behind me has 3-bet. This isn't a very good hand. I want to play it because this player's range is so wide, but I think it's probably stretching a little too much. If I was double suited, I would definitely play it. If they had showed me the flop ahead of time, I would definitely play it. But I think it was just a little bit below. It would have been maybe too much, but maybe a reasonable exploitative call there, right? Where nobody behind me is being too aggressive, and my opponent, the person ahead of me, is being very aggressive, and I'm the button. Like, having position is a very big deal. And this is the sort of like, okay, I have a suited ace, but I have one wheel card, so I have ace 4, and then the 6 connects to the 4. But I think when you have like that, kind of negates the connection between the ace and the 4. That's a whole thing. And then the jack doesn't connect to anything but the ace. And, again, I'd catch one of these kind of decent flops, but, very tricky to play on a lot of runouts, including this one. So, yeah, a lot of a lot of hands just made straights. You know, you've got king, queen, queen, 8, and 8, 7. So it's pretty easy for someone to have any of those. If I were here with my jack 6, I would just be folding to a bet because I'm not blocking any of the straights, and I have 4 outs to a boat, and none of them are the nut boat. So it wouldn't be a very good situation. And again, I have garbage, so I'll just pitch it, and we'll follow the hand as it proceeds. All right, the button raises. So this player's been on the tighter side, so I would expect them to have a range around half the hands, but maybe less, right? Some players play too tight on the button. Like, they might have the correct ranges in earlier positions, but then they don't expand that enough when their position improves and everyone folds to them. They get called by 2 players, and we know that the player in the small blind was dealt 4 cards, and I know whether chose to play them or they just, you know, by default played them because they were dealt them. But they didn't 3-bet, so that's a thing. So they probably don't have all of the best hands. Like, I wouldn't expect them to have king here very much. I do think a 10, a 6, some diamonds are all possibilities. This half pot bet to me suggests maybe a 6, maybe a 10. You know, they can be bluffing. I almost feel like with this player, though, those full pot bets are maybe a little more likely to be bluffs. The other player finally puts in the raise. You would expect them to have a full house. I expect them to have a full house in that case. Double suited pairs play very well, but I think double suited deuces from the low jack are a hand we can let go of. Not even like good deuces, right? One suited to the 3, one suited to the jack. The jack doesn't connect with anything. Button goes ahead and raises, which I would expect them to have 50 or more % of their hands. I've marked that they open limped, but I haven't said which positions they did that in. Some players aren't really going to open limp the button mostly. They'll generally be raising. If they're always raising when they come in on the button, then they're going to have basically any 4 cards, and they've probably just decided, oh, I have the button, I'm always going to raise in this spot. Queen 7, 7, 6 with a queen high suit is a hand that I'd be quite happy to catch a free flop with, but I'm certainly not going to call a raise. You know, it's got a couple of components. It's got 3 components that are nice, but nothing that's awesome, and obviously some, you know, disconnectivity between the queen and the 7. All right, jack 5 deuce. And a 6. Diamonds get there. So the nuttiness on this board, like what constitutes the nuts, just changed dramatically, right? It was a set. It was top set. And then on the turn, top set isn't, it's like the 3rd hand category. There's flushes, there's straights. Now there's even more straights. 4, 7, and 7, 9 just made a straight. One shouldn't probably be drawing to those. Maybe if you have 4, 7 of diamonds and you're drawing to an 8 of diamonds or a 3 of diamonds. But large bet here from this person who's been... Yeah, okay, so they have the nuts. They've been quite passive pre-flop, but we've seen them get busy post-flop a fair amount. Ace, Queen, 8 tray, pretty much just trash. We're going to pitch it. And we have a raise and a cold call. Again, those 2 players playing a lot of hands, so I'd suspect that they have similar ranges. We saw the player with the who just cold called here, player number 2. We saw them limp kings and then just call a raise, so I wouldn't be surprised if they could have some ace-ace combos. Quite unlikely, given that we folded an ace. You know, and would have 3 pair at this point. Would be a very dicey spot to play 3 pair, because while it's hard for someone to beat us with pair type things, like, yeah, they could have a set of 10s, and the other sets are possible, but unlikely. King Jack and Jack 9 both make straights. Now, of course, those 3 pair would make the nuts. And if I were in this hand, I would probably be leading out, right? I wouldn't be like, oh, let's see if they'll bet their king. Wow, okay, so... they did check the King Jack, so we had 1 player with King Jack, and the winner ended up having a set of queens that made the boat. So that would have been a 2-outer, and Interestingly, they did not bet the queens full, right? So I'm gonna say checks back, queen, queen on ace, 10, 8, queen, ace, river. Multi-way. So that was in position. That's a spot where I think, when you have queens full in that situation, it's not a very powerful hand, but it's a hand with value. And if your opponents check to you, then you're probably good. And especially when the money went in on the turn with a bunch of straights there, I think you can make a smaller bet size trying to get value from a straight. And somebody could even have theoretically a smaller boat. Okay, I think rainbow, this is a fold. But if it make the 8 a 9 or a queen, and I'd say we play it. But, yeah. I'm going to say a thing here. Let's see. Yeah, we're going to mark this, tag it, pre-flop. Just to double check, right? Double check. Right. As always, let me know if there's any hands that you'd like me to review in the post-flop session. And if you're on YouTube, you can just, if you include a timestamp, that makes it a lot easier in terms of finding the hand that you're talking about. If you're like, oh, we're at, 31 minutes in or whatever, then okay, that's, we might not be 31 minutes in on YouTube because I might clip the just for Twitch intro where I babble about how much sleep I got or didn't got. That's how much sleep I didn't got. I mean, it was a fair amount. It's not that bad, but I did a lot of talking yesterday. I did my stream, I did someone else's stream, I did 2 podcasts, and I did a coaching session. So it all adds up. And I found that actually using words or listening specifically to words is more mentally fatiguing to me than a lot of other types of mental activity. I feel like it burns through mental energy pretty quickly. So yeah, there's that. Maybe I need to read more. I've been reading more lately. I have to go to the library and pick up 2 things, although they're both movies, so I don't know. But Once Upon a Time in China and Infernal Affairs, which are both in Cantonese, and I'm looking forward to. I think they're both. I think it's the Cantonese version of Once Upon a Time in China. I don't know. They probably some of these movies they have a Cantonese and a Mandarin version, but I don't know whether it's the Cantonese version or it's just the version, which is Cantonese. Okay, I have a good 3-betting hand here, and my opponent raises way too many hands. Good 3-betting hand. I've got components of a good 3-betting hand and components of a good 4-betting hand, but I think I'm just going to call as I feel like I'm going to get a bloated multi-way pot out of position, and it's going to be a pretty tricky spot to play. The fact that there are that basically almost everyone's in, and I flop basically nothing. I have kings and 10s, and if a 10 comes on the turn, if we get a free turn card, I'll be fairly delighted. This player decides to lead out. They're basically saying they have a king or pocket deuces. I mean, a flush draw here, you really shouldn't be bluffing with. I feel like if you have a king, you're making a semi-bluff, basically, in this spot. You're betting with equity. Okay, king 2. Yeah, wow. So, that's the kind of hand that I allowed to come in by just calling. But that's fine. I mean, I'm going to have a lot of flops that I can play confidently with that hand. I'm going to have some nut flush draws, some nut flushes, a lot of nut straight draws and nut straights, and the nut straight draws will often be wraps. And I can flop top sets. I can flop a good top 2. A lot of good ways that hand can go, and that was none of them. I feel like I was going to do a thing. We won't do the thing if there was a thing to do. Oh, yeah, let's mark that hand for pre-flop because I think the flop pretty much played itself. Um, but the fact that those two players who'd already put the raise in makes me feel like, I'm not sure how much I want to expand my ranges against players who are just really dramatically way out of line, or whether I want to stay, fairly snug and just kind of print with those money, with those hands, right? Where I mean, the thing about that last hand is if I could have made it like 25 or somewhere in that ballpark, right? Because I think I went call 550 550. That's 11, 12, yeah, like 27, 28 maybe. So if I had gotten even one caller, I would have a stack to pot ratio of around 1 to 1. And if I got multiple callers, it would be less than 1 to 1. So there'd be a lot of flops where I would just jam out of position. That flop might not have been one of them, though. So that would have been a little dicey, that particular board. But there would have been a lot of boards where I'm just like, all right, let's go. If I had aces, ace, queen, 10, I definitely would have 3-bet. And so that's kind of part of the issue there is that I didn't have really. I wasn't going to flop an overpair very often. I didn't have a pair in my hand that was going to have enough equity on enough boards, I think, that I would just want to be getting it in really wide. Okay, so what? Was that a check raise? And then, yeah, so the one player maybe had aces, or they had the 10, and then oh, wow, oh, okay. What? Uh, yeah, so we'll fold this. This looks like something, but like I think we need to make the 5 a 6 for this to be like playable. Let's I want to look at that last hand. Like what happened? Um I'll bring it up here because it was exciting. Let's see what happened. We had a raise, a call, and then it goes check and call, and then it goes check, raise, call, and then the river goes check, jam. That's hilarious. They trapped them. I think they could have just jammed the river with their quad tens and gotten called by ace, but maybe the in position player would have bet with like air or something. Who knows? That's an interesting hand. So when I see player 6, right, the one where my mouse is over here, who's currently on the button, when I see them play a hand like that, it's kind of a little sort of fancy playish, right? And that's something to note. But the reason I'm not writing a note on this is that opponent they played it against is so far out of line so often. They're just playing all their hands, right? And they're playing quite aggressively in some spots aside from post flop. So as they bet $1 into 15. But the player who made that play against them, I don't want to make big assumptions about how they play or how they would play against me, because I think most players are going to make some level of adjustment against somebody who's playing 97% of their hands compared to someone who's playing 16% of their hands so far, right? So I think we want to be careful about, you see someone do something against someone else and don't assume, right? Don't make an assumption, or you make an ass out of you and umption about what they're going to do. And this, very pretty on the button, nice, defending the big blind against a raise, okay, I think. But in the low jack, in a very loose game, if I open raise this, I'm gonna get like a 20-way pot. And the thing is, look at my straight cards, like, okay, this is like the best flop ever, right? Not literally, but my flush draw is to the nut low flush draw, and I have an open ender and one pair. So my instinct was like, oh, this flop's amazing. And it's like, oh, actually, even though it feels like it's the best flop, and that kind of was my point, that it's like, it looks like a great flop, but it's actually got some issues, right? And we might have lost one. player, but the game still looks fantastic. I'm, quite pleased to be sitting at this table, whether this player rebuys or not. Sadly, they didn't, but, we still have two players playing over 50% of their hands, which is a good sign. We've got a nice double-suited, somewhat connected hand that is mostly missing the flop. In Hold'em, when you have a hand like 7-9 and there's two 8s on board, you're like, ooh, I'm blocking 8-9 and blocking 8-7. Like in Omaha, that is not quite as big an effect. I imagine there are situations where it's a big deal, but I don't think those are situations where your opponents are playing, 50 whatever percent of their hands. And this player might not be playing 50% of their hands in this position. They might be playing a little tighter in the, they seem to open limp all positions. Whether they have any level of positional awareness, I don't know. I don't have any pop-ups right now. I'm fine not having pop-ups at the moment, but I am going to gradually kind of build out my HUD. My philosophy here is I only want to have stats in the HUD that I'm going to actually use, right? I only want to have stats that are going to represent actionable data. And so I've just pared it down to just voluntarily put money in pot, pre-flop raise percentage, and 3-bet percentage. And then, of course, the number of hands, so I know what kind of sample I'm looking at. As we go on, as I play longer sessions also and get larger sample sizes on people, I am going to, okay, they flopped good and they rivered good. Let's see if the other person had an 8 when they bet the flop. Yeah, the other person had an 8, but they had Jack 8-5-5, and that's one of those dicey spots where I say dicey a lot, but I think Pot Limit Omaha is a dicey game. You got to deal with a lot of dicey spots in this game, and you fold your trip 10s though, as we discussed in a prior segment. When you have a pair in your hand and you've hit the trips with the board, not with the pair in your hand, but it was like 8-8-3 and they had 8-5-5 Jack, you can only hit the 5 or the Jack. But if you had 8-6-5 Jack, now you could hit the 6-5 or the Jack. And to make matters worse, you have 2 5s, so you're actually blocking one of your potential 5s. So if you flop trips, you don't want to have a pair in your hand, unless it's like a set. And then, that's great. Sets are good. We like sets. Okay. Time for a water break. Chat amongst yourselves. Which is funny because you're not, but maybe it's not funny. I don't know. Okay, where are we? We're about 2/3 through the session. We'll play a little while longer. I have a chauffeuring appointment to, gotta take someone to the dentist. Everyone's going to the dentist. Oh no, it's not a dentist. It's another thing. Whatever. Someone's got to go to a place and I gotta take them there because I am the designated driver, apparently. But we will maintain the normal session length or the regular session length. I think over the weekend I might do a little extra kind of longer stream. I might mix up the format a little bit and keep it as it's been, but then actually do some like 2 or 3 table streaming. If anyone's particularly in favor of or against that, let me know. But I'll probably do it anyway. But I want to hear what you have to say. I know that the single table streaming is probably more helpful for newer folks, and the more multi-table is probably of more interest to more experienced players. I think at the moment my stream is probably more interesting towards the kind of less experienced PLO players. I think as I gain skill, I think it'll be increasingly useful and interesting towards more experienced players. So this is what I was talking about, where if I had a pair in my hand, if I had like Jack 9-5-5, I could only hit 2 of the 5s or 3 9s. But here I have a lot more cards I can hit, so I'm definitely going to go ahead and bet. How much do I want to bet? I'll bet half pot. I could bet less than half pot too, and that would be fine. But I think, this is like, all right, if somebody has a flush draw, I think they will probably fold. Now this person has been sneaky, right? We've seen this person be sneaky. I have a Jack with a 9, which is probably one of the worst Jacks anyone's going to have. It's hard for them to have 3 unpaired kickers that also are lower than a 9. So I'm going to check it back and river the second nuts. If they bet, I will call, and if they check, I'm going to bet half pot and try and get a call from like ace jack. If they have a hand like 10-9, you know, if they had like king jack 10-9, I think they would call there. They would have made the straight. As it turned out, they did not, and they folded. And I think this is a pretty clear fold. If we have the ace, the suited ace is nice, and having a third, another wheel card to go with like ace 2-3, I think has some value. But we want the 7 to be something like a king or maybe a queen, I think. And I'll mark that just to look at, oh no, because then I have to look at ace king, ace queen. There's not really a super easy way to look at that. I do want to kind of test that assertion though, so we'll do that. We'll look into this one pre-flop, and we'll actually look at the kind of trashy hand that we opened on the button and look at that for pre-flop as well. If the opponent was playing a flush draw in that hand and we gave him a free river card, there's some chance though that the river pairs us and makes them a flush, and that would be pretty special. Having seen them slow play their trips earlier, which then they turn quads, I don't even know whether they were slow playing or they were just being cautious. I thought there was a fair chance that they had a jack, and they might have had a jack and folded it because they didn't make a boat. And the straight draw got there, so they know, well, even if I didn't make a boat, maybe I made a straight. Hard to say. All right. It's an interesting river card. It brings the straight and the flush, but there's already a pair on board. And since the bet was large, that would imply that they're trying to bet something like a flush, but I mean, sorry, like a boat, since they like potted it. But it's, you know, we don't know. All right, so we've lost 2 of our friends at this table, but it's still a very friendly table. The player on our left now, which is not the position that we most want, like the loose passive player, right? Having a passive player on the left is nice because if it ever folds to us in the small blind, then we get to play heads up, small blind versus big blind, in against a passive opponent, and so particularly when we're blind versus blind, if the player behind us, right, the player who's going to have position on us the whole time, is a more passive player, that mitigates that positional disadvantage, right? Usually the way that we take advantage of position is we're going to have better spots to utilize aggression. And so if they're not doing that, then, you know, that's an upside of having a passive player on our left. Also, when we're the cutoff and they're the button, then we're going to have a spot where the only player on our left is passive. But if they're very loose pre-flop, then we're going to have a lot of out of position pots where we've raised the cutoff and they've flatted the button, and it's going to be fairly awkward. Again, their passivity, especially if it's post-flop, is going to help us realize our equity more, so that's good. But the fact that we're having to play a lot of pots out of position is a negative. Like having a really tight player on our left, if they're like tight and passive, that's ideal. But, you know, this is fine. That's nothing like, oh, I don't want to play at this table. It's still quite a good table. You know, I mean, we look at the other players and, like, no one else is practically raising anything. I mean, we're playing very tight so far, right? But nevertheless, our 13% pre-flop raise is higher than anyone else's. All right, so I pick up a straight draw on the turn, but it's quite a poor straight draw. It's to the lower end, and there's already king jack and jack 8 available, so not really a great situation. Ace queen 10-6, I think I open this if it folds to me in the small blind. The 6 is such a trashy card though. I'm not sure. I'm not suited to the ace. Maybe this is actually a fold. I recant. All right, so I'm gonna fold anyway. If I was suited to the ace, I would play it. You know, ace queen jack, like I almost know who this player is because they made it $2 in the big blind, and we've seen that a fair amount from a player with stats like this, so I figure it's probably the same person. Like sometimes I wonder, is there a pool of like 10 people who play these games at this hour and I'm just always playing with the same people? You know, it's like I'm playing with 5 out of the 10 possible opponents, and sometimes people cycle in and out. I do think at certain hours the player pool is quite narrow, and at other hours it's much bigger. Like in the evening, I think it's a deeper player pool. All right. Yeah, this hand, let's also mark this hand for pre-flop. And we're like mostly going to do a pre-flop review at the end of the session. And hopefully in a few weeks, like in a month, or by the end of this month or so, or by the end of like 30 streams, you know, my pre-flop game will be solid, and we'll still discuss pre-flop decisions, and we'll still look things up when it's like, oh, I'm not quite sure about that one. Let's take a look. You know, constantly kind of smoothing off the rounding off the circle, smoothing the edges, basically. But yeah, I mean, I already feel I'm speaking with somewhat more confidence on the pre-flop decisions, but there's a lot of room to go there. All right, we'll open this up. We'll get this set up ahead of time for the stream. Okay. So that we can just hop right into the matrix when it is time. So this is a hand that I will certainly open raise. I think it's a pretty good 3-betting hand as well. Although maybe you mostly want to like double suited hands to 3-bet, right? Yeah. Ace Jack 10-8 with the nut suit. All right, so this player should be calling quite frequently because they call a lot, right? And they have the button. It looks, yep, there they go. The other players are not very aggressive, so I'm not super concerned that I'm going to get squeezed. I think when we do go ahead and 4-bet with a hand like this, we mostly want to be double suited, right? I think these single suited hands don't do a lot of 4-betting. Basically because if we do get called, then there's going to be just way more boards that we can play confidently. We're going to have that little bit extra equity where we're going to be able to confidently get it in and realize our equity and potentially deny some equity ourselves. Okay, so gut shot, backdoor nut flush draw, some overcards. A lot of good turn cards. There's a lot of good turn cards, but we don't hit any of the pairs on the board, so we're not blocking anything. We have 1 diamond blocking potential diamond draws, but 4 ways, I'm just, you know, this isn't a spot where I'm like, oh, let's put more money in the pot. Okay, I turned top pair and I turned an open-ended straight draw, right? Still only the 7 is to the nuts, and I'm facing a full pot bet. I think this is fairly trivially easy fold. I've really only got 3 outs to the nuts, another 3 outs to a bigger straight, and then 2 outs to, you know, straights where there would be a flush on board. Here I'd have top 2 and there'd be a flush on board. If this player had a hand like 7-8, they're basically saying, yeah, I turned some stuff and I had the nut flush draw. I mean, when you pot it out of position, you're basically just saying you had the nut flush draw. Now, they could have something like the ace of diamonds with an 8-7 and not have a second diamond. That would be a hand that would be interesting to play this way, where they flopped, where they turned the nuts, and then on the river they think, my hand's probably not good, but I'm actually going to bluff because I have the ace of diamonds. Whether or not that would be good, I'm not certain, but it would be interesting. It would be, I guess, worth considering. But maybe more likely they had a hand like Queen Jack, maybe Queen Jack 8 or something, and now they ended up, you know, Ace Queen Jack 8 with the ace of diamonds. That seems like I like that hand as a bluff. Okay, let's fold this garbage. And shall we do one more orbit, or shall we call it here? Let's wrap up after the next hand, and then we'll proceed to session review. A little bit less focused, not focused, actually I feel pretty focused, just a little less mental energy than some days. And I expended a lot yesterday, and so shouldn't be surprising. and shouldn't really be upsetting. It's just, I think every day we need to kind of take inventory of where we're at, to use a poker term, and accept that and think, okay, are there things I want to do that are going to be difficult today? And if there are, what can I do to try and get through that? Or what can I do to try to, replenish some of my mental energy? And if we have the opportunity for kind of a chill day, then maybe those are the days that we take the kind of chill days. Having said that, I think when you're trying to establish habits and you're trying to progress and move forward, I think finding a way to kind of fight through some of those days and make them not zeros, I think is very helpful. All right, I have 4 overcards and the second nut flush draw. I'm not blocking any pairs. If I had one pair, I would definitely bet here. This feels close-ish to me. There's so many good turn cards. If they do something like, I was going to say, if they make a bet other than pot, I'm going to probably continue here. They bet full pot, and I just don't get to continue that many hands against a full pot bet, and I'm going to fold this one. If my draw were to the nuts, I would continue. I like having the third spade in that hand. I think it's interesting because I'm blocking. I'm just going to mark that, and we're just going to go straight into the session review, actually, because, I can just keep talking about that hand. I thought I marked it. I did mark it, right? Yeah. Why isn't it showing up in marked hands? It should. Is it at the bottom? No. Why wouldn't it show up? Okay, let's undo that. Let's do that. Is it there now? It's not there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. So much for the seamless transition. All right, we'll replay all hands. We will close this. All right, good night table. And we will bring this one over. Hello, table. Let me make sure I don't have some urgent message relating to the stream. Oh, okay, cool. All right, so what have we got here? Let's just get right back into this hand and transition smoothly into the session review. Maybe I'll cut that part out that wasn't smooth. All right, so pretty good pre-flop, I would say. I mean, should we even bother looking it up? I don't think so. I think this is just like a slam dunk play. I don't think we should look it up, and then they look it up. Great. But yeah, ace, king, queen, jack is okay. So here's a reason to look it up. Would be, what do I do if I get 3-bet? And the answer is, if I'm suited to the ace, I call. Suited to the king, not suited to the ace, basically, I fold to a 3-bet. So if I get 3-bet, I should have folded this hand, theoretically speaking. So, okay. I flop Broadway, right? I have 10, jack, queen, king, ace. However, I need 2 more Broadway cards to make that a real thing instead of some mythical thing where I get to use all 4 whole cards. I also, I guess, have a flush. If I can use all 4 whole cards, I can use 3 of them, right? King, queen, jack. But that's not PLO. Omaha means 2 cards from the hand, 3 from the board. So I decided to check. If I was blocking any of the pair business, I would have bet here. If I had the nut flush draw, I'd be a little more inclined to bet. And if I had the nut flush draw and I checked and they bet, I'd be much more inclined to call. I was saying, though, that I like this flush draw more than I like most tri-suit flush draws. And the reason is that I have the king, queen, and jack of spades. So when my opponent called a raise, if they have the ace of spades, they can't have it with the king, queen, or jack of spades. They can't have it with the 10 of spades. They can't have it with the 6 of spades. So they can only have it with lower spades. And so having this extra spade in my hand actually makes it less likely that they're going to have the nut flush draw. So that's kind of a sort of unsung benefit of having a third of a suit in your hand, is when you make the non-nut flush and you're, hoping that it's good. Of course, that means that it's a little harder for me to get value from the third nut flush or the fourth nut flush because they can't make those. If an ace of spades came on the turn, all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, I don't want the queen of spades or the jack of spades in my hand. I want the deuce of spades, right? So everything changes with the turn of a card. But they full pot it and like whatever. I think this is fine. I think I'm going to flop top pair on a ton of flops with this hand. This wasn't one of them. And, I have a backdoor straight draw and a flush draw that's not fantastic. So I just fold and we go to the next hand. All right, ace, queen, 6-10. We're going to look this up. The question was, first I was like, oh, this is a good 3-betting hand. This is not a good 3-betting hand. The 6, the question is like, how bad is this 6, right? So if we go back to the thing, I was originally thinking, should I 3-bet this against like an open from any given position? So I'll check small blind versus button and see whether we're 3-betting anything like this. Ace, queen, single suited, with a 10 and a 6 is just folded no matter what the suitedness is, right? Even if I have the ace high suit. Double suited, however, we'll look at ace queen double suited, ace queen 10-6 double suited. All of a sudden that I'm going to 3-bet and I'm actually going to call a 4-bet. So that makes a huge difference, right? When you're double suited, of course, one of those suits has to be to the ace because every card is suited to another, so the ace must be suited to one of the other cards. So very big difference. This hand double suited, this hand single suited. And I think that's something I want to like kind of internalize as a bit more of a heuristic, is that double suitedness makes a huge difference just in general, but especially in terms of like our 3-betting hands. I'm looking at the chart and there's a lot of 3-betting with the double suited combos. But if I go back to the single suited combos, there's very little 3-betting. Basically, it's you've got to have a jack, and then a 10, or and those are or a 10 and a 9. Those are the only ones you're going to 3-bet and call a 4-bet. And then some slightly weaker hands. 10-6 is actually kind of on the cusp. If it's, and by the cusp I mean it's a fold, but it's near the business. The 7 is a better card than the 6, right? Because the 10 and the 7 can make a nut straight. And then they can make another straight that's not the nuts, except then the queen 10 makes that straight. So mostly it's that it's a higher card and it makes a little nuttier thing. Okay, and we ended up folding, and that was the question for that hand. This hand, another pre-flop question. Let's see what we've got. We are in the cutoff, and was the question, do we open the cutoff with this? I think the question was, with ace 3 suited and a deuce, what do we open the cutoff? What sorts of hands like that do we open the cutoff with? So I am going to go to cutoff open raise range, and I will what's the best way to look this up? If I look at it like ace 7, it's just all going to be folds, right? Ace 7 with so ace 7 6-5, ace 7 6-4, ace 7 5-4, ace 7 5-3. So if the other two cards both connect well ish with the 7, and you have the ace high suit, then that would be an open. So if I made the 2 a 5, I would play this hand, but the 2 and the 3 are quite poor. And I think double suited, let's just quickly check out double suited. This hand, even double suited, wow. So ace 7 3 deuce double suited, also just a fold. Deuces are really bad in PLO, and 3s are pretty bad too. But if I had like ace queen with the 3-2 and I was suited to the ace, still a fold. So the 3-2 is just really bad, right? Having the 3 and the 2 in the hand is really bad. If I have ace king 3-2 and I'm suited to the ace, now I can 3-bet. And if I'm in position, now I can open. And if I get 3-bet by someone I have position on, I can call. And if they have position on me, then I'll fold. Like if the button 3-bets me, then I would fold that hand. So that's ace king 3 deuce double suited, and that's suited to the ace and the king. So learned a little something, right? And I guess the next question would be like on the button, like do I play this on the button? Ace 7, single suited with a 2 and a 3, no, right? Even with the ace high suit. So again, 2s and 3s, bad, very bad. That's the takeaway from this hand. I folded it though, right? Yeah. So I was pretty sure that that was going to be a fold, but I wanted to know, like, how close is it, right? I was thinking maybe it's an open on the button, but no, right? Having a 2 and a 3 in your hand, even with an ace, very bad. All the straight, you're just going to make very bad straights, and when you hit pairs, they're not going to be good pairs. All the other pairs are going to beat them. All right, Jack 9 5 7. This might be a questionable open. We're on the button. I think now I feel like it's probably going to be a fold. It is a fold. Single suited Jack 9. The 5 and the 7 are just they're too far, right? Jack 9 8 7. However it's suited, single suited, is going to be a hand that we play, and if we're rainbow, we're just folding it. Jack 9 8 7, we're still folding that. So this hand does not make the cut. We did raise it, however, and get 2 callers. And so in this scenario, it's probably even worse to raise, because we're just, the value that this hand gets is probably mostly from just everybody folding, right? The fact that nobody's 3-betting us much might make it kind of okay-ish, but the high rake environment and the high VPIP of the opponents, the fact that they're going to see a lot of flops with us, I think makes this pretty poor, and I should just fold. All right, so we get check to us. Bad trips. If I'm going to check back trips, if I had like the 7 of diamonds, I think that might be an interesting hand to check back, where I would have weak trips, right? So a kind of, a boat draw, but like an okay made hand where I have some value where I can call bets on the turn, and a lot of turn cards aren't going to be terrible for me. If it's a diamond, then I make a flush and I can beat some higher jacks, and it's harder for someone else to have a flush. But here my equity is a little less robust, and if I get someone to fold a flush draw, which they can on this paired board, I'm okay with that. I get a call. The 8's not a great card for a couple of reasons. One, this opponent called a bet on the flop, and they called a raise pre-flop. People call raises when they have, if this person has a jack, an 8 is a reasonable card for them to have with a jack, right? So since it kind of connects with the jack, since it connects with the jack and to a decent extent, I think it's a little more likely to have made them a boat than if, say, a 3 or a 4 came off. In addition to that, I have a 7 and a 5 in my hand, which, if this turn card were a 3 or a 4, hitting a 7 or a 5 on the river would still be the nuts. But now if I hit a 7 or a 5, and I decide to check back because I only have a few nut outs, right? I have 4 nut outs, a jack or 3 of the 9s, or the 3 9s. Now I do hit the 7, but it's the second nuts, right? So I can't just go wild on the river. I don't want to go like bet, raise, 3-bet. I don't want to get all the chips in. I want to put a bet in, and I want them to call my bet. And I want that not to be copyrighted music outside that I end up getting a copyright strike for somebody walking outside my window, which probably won't happen. But yeah, it's it's kind of annoying. Okay, so I have the second nuts. I don't think my opponent has anything that special. I'm not betting less because my hand's weaker and therefore I'm more worried it's going to lose. I'm betting less because I think my opponent's range, the hands in my opponent's range that I'm trying to target, are weaker, and so I'm less likely to be able to get a large bet out of them, right? So that's the purpose there. So I decide to bet half pot, and they just fold, and then we move on to the next hand. Okay. What happens next? Ace, queen, 10, 10. We've got several very loose opponents, and right, this one I thought was interesting. We have a raise, a call, and then it's up to me, and I have to decide, do I want to call or do I want to 3-bet? I think this is clearly a hand I can call. Where am I going to find this in the matrix? I am going to look up big blind versus cutoff squeeze, right? So big blind squeeze, cutoff. Okay, that's what it is. And I have 10-10 and single suited. So here 10-10 ace queen with the best suit, which I do have, it actually likes to raise. Okay, so I wasn't wrong that this is a good raising candidate. If I did not have the ace high suit, then it's supposed to be more of a call. So yeah, I think that's an interesting, that's a good thing to know. knowing that my opponents are even looser, I think that actually makes the 3-bet better. So I think I should definitely be 3-betting more. And this is, calling is, you could say it's a mistake, right? It's not a mistake as in I should have folded. I think calling is fine, but I think raising would be better, right? So optimal would be to put the raise in there. Playing this flop, I'm not even going to think too much about what I would have done. We see a large bet on a king deuce flop, trivially easy fold. They ended up showing king deuce, and good for them. This is the kind of hand that put in that 550, right? King queen 5 deuce with a suit to the queen. So they probably are gonna fold if I 3-bet. That's fine. I still have 2 opponents that are probably gonna put money in bad. And if they fold, that's also great. I mean, I win a nice size pot pre-flop. All right, so 10-10 jack 7, it folds to me, and I folded. I think that is definitely, well, I'm pretty confident that's going to be correct. I am the cutoff. 10-10 jack 7 single suited would be a hand that I'd want to play, right? That's a raise and actually call a 3-bet, but when I remove the suitedness, 10-10 jack 7 barely doesn't make the cut. 10-10 jack 8, 10-10 jack 9, those are hands that I want to play. So we know that, and we move on to the next. Oh, yeah, I folded, right? Yep, we folded. And I don't think there was anything else in this hand that was like something I wanted to pay attention to. No. All right, a few more hands left. And ace king 9 tray. And I believe this is just primarily a pre-flop situation again. A lot of pre-flop checkups. I was the hijack, meaning there's 2 players behind me. So ace king single suited from the hijack. Basically everything that's not super terrible, and this barely misses the cut, right? So ace king 9-4 I should play. Ace king 9-3 is actually a little too loose, which leads me to believe, okay, I should open this from the cutoff, and from the hijack is just a little too loose. I do flop well, and I think actually going for like a check raise against a player like this is worth considering if they're going to stab too often. If they were to bet here and I check raise, I can make it somewhere between like 30 and 40-ish, depending on how much they bet, 40 something maybe. And if I do that, maybe they'll get it in with me with something that's in pretty bad shape. Having said that, they can be in really good shape with a hand like ace 10 of clubs, and then just kind of any other 2 side cards almost probably. And so yeah, I decide to bet. I bet half pot. I get called, and then the turn's a 4, and I bet on the like 2/3 region, I guess. And I have the 3. That's one of the things that makes me like this bet a little bit more, and I think I'm fine with it. I feel like I discussed it enough during the session. There's a blocker, yeah. I've got top 2. There's some draws that people can have, and not a ton of draws, mostly clubs, but some gut shots as well. And, also like ace, queen, jack 10 is a draw. It's a draw to top 2 pair, and it's got 9 outs. And if I can get that to fold or charge it to draw, I think that's a positive. So, and hands that can call me are ace 4, ace deuce, mostly that's it, but also some of the draws, of course, right? So fold that pre-flop, but otherwise I'm okay with it. And then this is opening from the hijack, and we just wanted a quick checkup. We're already in the hijack open raise spot. Double suited 8s. We are going to wait. What? That is really weird. Double suited 8s with a king and a queen specifically fold, but like every other high card combination raises. I don't understand. Sometimes the charts just don't make any sense. Like you look at, so the chart, I'll get on with like what I'm using is it's the PLO matrix from Um, it's the PLO matrix from Upswing Poker. And hold on. It's basically it's solver output, right? They ran a solver basically trying to say what should you theoretically play pre-flop. They run it on computers on servers with like a half a terabyte of RAM each for months, and then it spits out this information. And sometimes you look at the information and you're like, what? Because this exact hand, it wants to fold, but if the queen were a jack, it would. Okay, I get it. Okay. So if the queen were a jack, it would definitely play it, right? If the queen were a 7, it would play it. And it's like, why is that? And I think that's because just in terms of the connectivity, the queen and the 8 make the same straight as the king and the queen. So it's like you're losing one card's worth of connectivity. Whereas king jack, you can make an ace high straight, you can make a king high straight, you can make a jack high straight. I guess. I don't know. Whereas here you can make a king high straight, you can make an ace high straight, and that's it. Maybe. I don't know. It's a little odd. So this hand actually is a fold from this position. But I would say playing it probably isn't a very large mistake. But it's another reason to be aware of those like triple gappers and how that kind of negates, renders redundant some of the value of your connectivity. DVA Mechanics, thanks for the follow. We're back at 40, so actually lost one follow during the stream. It's easy to like get in your head about such things, but like it's best not to. But it's nice to be back at 40 immediately. So thank you. We're making progress. We want to get past the 50 before there's any kind of, like 11 steps forward, 1 step back. Not 1 step back, 1 step forward. Okay. So I get tons of people in this pot, and I flop an overpair and 2 backdoor flush draws. I think in general, I'm going to be checking this board a lot. I'm not going to have a ton of 5-6. I'm going to have some ace-5 with a lot of my ace-whatever combos. So, I can rep some stuff, but I'm also not going to have a lot of sets here. I go ahead and check. I think that's fine with this hand. I think that's fine with my range. The deuce is a card that I consider maybe betting if it checks to me, but the blinds are the players who are most likely to have a deuce in their range. The small blind in general wouldn't be, but the small blind here is specifically fairly loose. So, I decide discretion is the better part of valor in this case, and we proceed backwards to the first hand. So aces, I put the raise in. I'm trying to think about how would we even contemplate whether this is a good spot to raise, right? We have aces, so it feels like it probably should be, but the 3 and the 4 aren't great, and I mean, there's worse combos of aces. Maybe there are some combos that I should overlimp, right? If I'm not suited to an ace. If I'm suited to the ace, I think this is a, super slam dunk, whatever. But here it's, I could see overlimping. I feel like overlimping might be a thing I do off stream, but on stream I'm like, oh, well, we got to raise the aces. So I think it's worth considering. Like, aces are always good in PLO before the flop, but there is some nuance, right? Some of them are better than others, and you don't always want to cram all the money in pre-flop. Having said that, there's like 2 very loose players so far from what I've seen, and even the other player I didn't really have data on, but like 2 players that have played all 2 or 3 of their hands passively so far, and have played this hand passively, right? So it's reasonable to believe we can get, some good equity, get our money in a decent spot pre, and that might be worthwhile. So I flop a gut shot, a pair, like blocking a pair, and I have my aces. And, if I had it back, I would probably lead for half pot here and basically make the first 2 players decide, okay, do you want to put all your chips in or not? And if you do, cool. If you don't, whatever, cool. And potentially play a pot against the button. Two pair combos are not going to be super common on this board, and neither are sets. Like 10-10, yeah, players are going to limp that. And, deuce-deuce is possible. 4-4 is technically possible, but I make it a lot less likely. So I was leaning towards like half potting here. I could even go smaller, right? I could bet quarter pot. I could just bet 6 again. I bet 6 pre-flop, bet 6 again, and then see what these people do. How does everybody respond to that? But I also didn't feel like building a pot out of position multi-way. I thought that there's so many bad turn cards, and maybe that argues for just a larger bet, right? Just be like, yeah, I'll just bet pot. And if somebody hit it, they hit it. But really, it's only going to cost me significantly if the button, the cutoff, the last person to act hit it. And they bet, and I tanked for this for a long time. And here's the thing. If I can call this bet and then we see the showdown, I'm in, right? Great. But first of all, if I call, then either of these players behind me can jam. And if they were doing something kind of trappy, that would be annoying. And if this better folded, I feel like I probably should call that because I do have the gut shot. It's unfortunate that I don't even have one of my suits, so I'm not going to have any backdoor spade equity. But I have the gut shot. I have the aces. Aces might be good. They could have a draw. And if they're not good, then I can hit a 5 or an ace, and those might be good. So, this is a very uncomfortable spot. Besides the players behind me, though, there's also the turn in the river to play. And if I call here, there will be 47 in the middle, 50 in the middle, basically. And then the cutoff here, I'll have to deal with potential future aggression, right? And they can easily just decide to get all the money in. I'm not going to want to get all the money in with this hand, having seen this flop multi-way. It's a fairly low SPR, but it's not super low. It's like 3.75 or something. So I don't know. I find every decision point in this hand troublesome. Like raising pre-flop even feels like like I feel like I'm supposed to, but it doesn't feel great because I just don't have that good of aces. I'm gonna have a lot of poor flops. This is kind of a great flop, but that sort of underscores how kind of marginal these aces are pre-flop, or how not great these aces are, is that I'm out of position 4 ways still. And not just these aces, but like the situation pre-flop, because I was so likely to get this kind of multi-way pot out of position. I'm guaranteed to be out of position. I'm the small blind. And then here on the flop, should I bet? And then should I call this? And I ended up folding. And we don't want to be too results oriented. This person jammed, and we get to see both of their cards. The one person decided to check call the flop with a gut shot and a backdoor flush draw and another backdoor straight draw, I guess, no pair. And then they jammed the turn with no pair, and then they rivered a pair. So, good for them. If they had the 9 of clubs, they would have won this hand. But the other person had king, 9 deuce, which also is like, I guess their hand was kind of like mine, where they were blocking something on the board, and they had a good overpair. And there was no, they did have a backdoor flush draw, though, to go with it. But they didn't have a backdoor straight draw. I had a gut shot. So, I would take my hand over theirs. But they had position, and that's like everything in this hand. And that just goes to show how important position is in a game like Pot Limit Omaha. And on that note, I will wrap up today's session, except we have one more thing from the chat. BuffyBot7 says, as a player not experienced in PLO, I like to focus on one game, but I'm curious to see what multiple games will be like, or what following multiple games will be like. Yeah, thank you for the response. I do understand that I think this format is going to be more appealing for some people, and the other format will be more appealing for other people. So I think when trying to decide between two, options, which are going to be good for some people, good for other people, like both. Why not both, right? So I think I might scale back this segment of the show and have it maybe be a total hour, like 30-minute play, 30-minute review, or 40-minute play, 20-minute review, and then take like a 2-minute break and then fire up 3 tables and do that. I might do that as soon as tomorrow if I get a layout that I feel comfortable with for three tables. So Yeah, when I do the 3 tables, let me know, how it feels following it. And it might take a few sessions. Also, if you're watching on your phone, 3 tables are going to feel different than if you're watching on like your television, right? If you're watching on a 40-inch screen, like having 3 tables, it's like, oh, I can see everything, right? Whereas on your phone, 3 tables can be a little bit, but I'll try to narrate the hands that are important. I'll be talking less about each individual hand, a little bit more of a kind of free flow. And when a hand comes up that's interesting, again, as always, we'll mark it. And questions are always appreciated. Feedback's always appreciated. Follows, subscribe, like, all these things on Twitch and YouTube. If you're on YouTube, check out Twitch. If you're on Twitch, check out YouTube. The links are in the places. They're actually on the screen, right? It says it at the bottom. Okay, so that's been it for today. Thanks, as always, for watching, and I'll catch you next time.